Well, it's exactly 3 o'clock. I assume we're ready to go.
We're ready.
We, call our meeting to order and go into roll call.
Yes. I have not heard anything from her. We begin, or would you like to wait a few moments? Begin. Okay, call the order at 3 p.m. and I will take roll. All right, Director Gallagher? Here. Julie Peterson? Here. Jessica Dixon? Absent. We will record her time upon arrival. And Chair Pimentel?
Here. Any changes to our agenda as submitted?
Nope.
Seeing none, any public comments not on the agenda? No attendees online, it looks like?
Nope.
Any comments from present? No. Great. Comments from committee members?
Jessica Dixon has arrived at 3:01 p.m.
So our first item is our minutes from June 24th, provided on consent. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Thank you, Director Gallagher and Julie Peterson. I'll take roll on this item. Director Gallagher? Julie Peterson? Yes. Jessica Dixon? Yes. And Chair Pimentel?
Yes. Our next item is our financial performance for June 2025.
All right, well, she's bringing that up. We have a number of things we're going to cover in today's financial performance. I'm going to go through some of the financials. I've kept back a few of the kind of just trended graph slides. I have them available as necessary, but want to be able to spend a little bit more time on some of the areas that we're doing some drill down. Just touch a little bit on our budget process and of course, our accounts payable backlog, and then I'm actually going to share the stage today with Steve and let him do some discussion around the budget bill. So that's what's in store for you. Okay. So it was another tough month. We have another loss. We're $1.3 million unfavorable on the EBITDA side and $1.4 million in total. As we've talked about before, we have some very low volumes, and so our labor, net revenue is going to be a problem, and I'm going to drill into that in a couple of subsequent slides, but it also translates into labor expense. It gets very hard to lower the volumes, lower the staff to the level of the volumes. We do have work that, there's a much more aggressive approach to closing units and kind of consolidating when we can do so. We've been doing, we do a weekly staffing and new positions, replacement positions, where we always kind of grill ourselves on whether or not we need to fill an open position. We also, as we've had some leadership changes, we've looked at leadership consolidations and sometimes not replacing leader for leader there. And so we continue to do that sort of work, but, the low census has really added to that challenge. The one other area you see here, purchase services unfavorable, that has been mainly driven by legal fees. And, we kind of run into a lot of things that challenge us as a government agency where we need some legal review because of increased scrutiny. As we're looking at, are there other funding opportunities available to us? We've kind of got to go through the structure and the limitations upon us as a government entity. We're doing some detailed lease work right now, and so that's required time with the legal team. And then as we have Public Record Act inquiries, those also eat up a lot of legal costs. So that's really the major driver on the purchase services side. Next slide. So on a year-to-date basis, that basically puts us $8.5 million in the hole. And as you can see, the big driver there is, almost $14 million variance in the net operating revenue. Our expenses, you know, they show us $5 million favorable here, so they are favorable, but they, you know, at a volume-driven perspective, they're not as favorable as, you know, it's just not the one for one. Next slide. So I took a stab at trying to kind of break down what's going on with the net revenue. And, I mean, this is, I'll always say these things are directionally correct. They're not, it's not a perfect science to how you get here. But I try to break this thing down and kind of say, what are the major components of a net revenue variance? Kind of determining a volume variance is not that difficult. You know, you do it at a high level based on kind of like adjusted patient days, but you kind of know what you budgeted per adjusted patient day, you know, how many adjusted patient days above or below your budget you are, and so you're able to do some math. So, you know, here I show that the volume variance makes up about 29% of our overall variance. So it's, you know, almost $4 million. Then you have a rate variance, and the rate variance really is where you have different things that can be contributing factors. You can have just, you know, different level of services that, you know, since every day or every year doesn't exactly compare to the prior year, you may do more expensive procedures or fewer procedures of a certain type. You have your payer mix variances. You have case mix, which kind of can tie into service mix, but it can kind of be an additional layer, and it can sometimes speak to the strength or lack thereof of the physician documentation. And then kind of what's left is where you might not be collecting everything that you could. And that's, in a sense, that's the one that when I try to do some calculations about all those other pieces, it's kind of what falls out at the bottom. And then, you know, we do have a piece here of, you know, we budget a certain amount of QAF and DISH, and we took a pretty conservative approach because we knew we wouldn't see much QAF-9 in 2025. But at the time we were budgeting, there was a hope that maybe we'd see some in the fourth quarter. But we also tend to spread a lot of these things over the course of all 12 months. So that's why there's an element of QAF and DISH here. So, you know, really as I kind of broke this down, and this is a year-to-date basis, so this is 6 months worth. You can see there's a pretty even spread between the big three of volume, kind of service/payer mix, and potential collection opportunities. Then going on to statistics. So, you know, it's been a very slow summer from an inpatient standpoint. June, you know, is a little stronger. July's been very slow. So we were not too far off in our admissions, but we had a low length of stay, so kind of translated into, you know, a lower average daily census. It was interesting because our case mix was a little bit higher, or, you know, for us, when I get up over 1.5, I'm, you know, kind of doing a celebratory dance. And so you can see we're at 155. But when I went and looked at the case mix, it's like 23 cases. So 23 out of, there's about 330 cases that make up the case mix calculation. And so it's about 7% of the cases really have the higher weighted relative weights, and the others are still, you know, fairly low. You know, a lot of our cases, you know, being in the OB or things that they're just have very low weights to kind of drag down our case mix. But in any case, it was a strong case mix month. It was a strong deliveries month. Surgeries pretty much held their own. You know, we didn't have the cath lab open yet. We just opened in July. So most of our outpatient variance is cath lab, but we also know, we've been down in some of the other specialties, like ortho. And ER was slow this month. It was kind of slow. Next slide. So on a year-to-date basis, I took a look at the year-to-date basis a little bit differently because you can see, we're 222 admissions below where we had planned in budget. So, and, from a days perspective, days on here? We don't have the days on here, but I have, I just looked at kind of keeping with the theme of service mix, what has changed year over year. And like our med surge days, we're down about 23% to where we were this time last year. ICU days, we're down about 23%. The days where we're up is OBGYN and NICU. NICU has actually been one of the largest favorable variances year over year because we're up about 40% from where we were last year. Not that we have a ton of NICU days, but that was a pretty significant increase. And, in a lot of cases, those OBGYN days are much lower acuity. And then, we put a pause on the PEDS program, so any PEDS under the age of 14 we're transferring out. If they come in through our ED, we're not keeping them here. So that is a 91% decrease year over year. Slide. So admissions, this is where the last couple of months I've been kind of doing a little deeper dive because you look here and you say, well, we have 17.5% commercial mix up at the top. That's one of our stronger months. The golden color, which is the Alliance, primarily it's the Managed Medi-Cal, but primarily Alliance, down slightly at 1.2%. Medicare's in the 28, almost 29%. But so I just dove into the commercial and the Managed Medi-Cal, and you look at the volume and what this represents is admissions, and yeah, we were up we had 17.5% of our admissions as commercial. We had about 7 more admits this month versus last month. But then you kind of drill into that gross revenue per admission and net revenue per admission, and they're down. They're down over prior months. They're down year to date as compared to last year. They have fairly low lengths of stay. They have decent case mix. Might be down a little bit from prior months, but they're well within range. But it's that mix of services or how long they stay that even though we have more of them, it's still kind of hitting us on the net revenue side. Same thing happened with the Managed Medi-Cal. We were fairly flat. We were down 2 admissions, but a pretty low length of stay at 2.8. Case mix was pretty high for the Alliance, but again, the gross and the net were down in comparison. Now, I say case mix high kind of goes back to that comment that case mix was higher in total, but probably as you go look, from that 7% I said before, maybe 3.5 or 4% of that might be, maybe even 5% might be Alliance. And so it's not a ton of cases. Next slide. Similarly, on the outpatient side, I took a look here at the Managed Medicare and commercial. One of the reasons I looked at Managed Medicare is, it's the gray one here, so it's at about 6.8%, but it's kind of been creeping up over time. Again, the gross and net were down. When I looked at kind of some of the different services, they're only down a few. Observations were down a few cases. ER outpatient was only down by 1. But the year-over-year dollar per visit was down fairly significantly. And so that tends to lead you to, you know, either the services they're getting or the ED level of care that they're recorded at. Commercial, you know, we had a good month, 26.3% in terms of the number of visits. The gross and net were slightly down. Year over year is down, but really the volume's there. So it's an area that we just kind of want to continue to. We're trying to build more reports for ourselves and to drill into so that we understand, you know, what services at that finer level of detail are coming here. You know, what payers, you know, help us with future contracting, things like that. That's that. So I'm gonna do this one slide because this is still kind of related to the overall financials. So one of the things that I've been tracking, and this is a little bit hard to read, but I figured it was still easier to see a picture versus seeing a chart. This is, when we did the budgets last year, we created initiatives kind of above and beyond the base, and we did our best to estimate what each of those initiatives would bring to the EBITDA. Many of our initiatives are not producing what we expected them to produce for a variety of reasons. So what this is showing you is kind of individually for each initiative what the impact has been. So kind of starting off to the left where you've got the blue, those are the ones that are providing some favorable impact to the budget, you know, as compared to budget. So supply expense, because we are flexing somewhat to our volume, we are, you know, doing some of the improvement work around contracting and the work with Vizient. Still more to do, but that's actually bringing a favorable, you know, it's about $750,000 favorable on a year-to-date basis. Our Santa Cruz County loan forgiveness, this was something that, you know, with the deal, we worked with the county over some loan forgiveness yeah, that was the he said, you know, hey, you do that for us, and we'll forgive some of this old loan. And we were recording a certain amount every month. That ended in June, and so we still had a few months to collect, so we got to take a little bigger chunk of that in June. So that's $600,000. The 340B program, and we're still working through the numbers, but we are seeing savings from getting the 340B program stood up, and you know, it's kind of ramping up. That's about $211,000. We've got our new primary care provider, Dr. Ravago, and you know, we had budgeted for a loss in his area, and it does operate at a loss, but it's not as much of a loss as what we budgeted for. So there's actually favorability to the EBITDA of about $189,000 year to date. Then there's a few things that we budgeted basically on a cash dependent and, you know, around retirement plans and leadership plans that we just haven't been able to implement, and so we're not accruing the expense, you know, so they're favorable to a budget perspective. But unfortunately, it's because of a cash constraint. And then everything in the orange kind of goes the other route and says, okay, this is where we're not meeting the target yet. One of them, I'm happy to say, is the LED light replacement. That budget was just spread evenly. We've started that project now. So while you have 6 months worth of you know, the project not producing its EBITDA, now that we've started it, you know, that's going to kind of shift, and that'll over time self-correct. We also we had an expense reduction for a system that just hasn't occurred yet. That's the Centricity at this point. $7,000. We've been tracking the Kaiser volume, and that's the new medical office building in Salinas. We're definitely seeing more volume in pretty much inpatients, ER visits, outpatient surgeries, other services. Our budget was spread fairly evenly, didn't really show for a ramp up since they just opened in September, but we are in tracking the numbers. We're seeing some ramp up, and so right now on a year-to-date basis, it's about $169,000 unfavorable to how our budget is spread, but you definitely see, it's a much smaller amount in June than it was in January or February. It was about maybe an $8,000 variance, I think, in June. Then we have our cath lab, and again, that budget in here, we had ramped it up in our pro forma, but it didn't kind of get rolled out that way in the budget. So it's a pretty even miss so far, but we've done our first cath lab procedure. The team is working hard to get some more procedures scheduled in there, and first procedure went well, a lot of positive feedback from patients, physicians. I think a lot of things went well there, so hopeful to start to see some improvement in those numbers. It'll probably still grow a bit until we get, some more volume under our belt. It will. The peds volume, unfortunately, that's one that, we've basically got a pause on that at this point, and so that unfavorable piece will continue to grow. The labor productivity and premium pay, doing a lot of work. I see sometimes in a month-over-month comparison, some improvements, but, a little bit more volume would go a long ways towards helping that variance. And then the last one is it's called the radiology fee increase. This is kind of an offset between, we knew we were going to pay more fees for the radiology changes. We've still, there's some lag in terms of when offsetting collections will come to us, and so we're still working to try to get some out of the old group, plus see how that's going to materialize with the new group. So I think we're still a few months out from kind of seeing how the tide changes there, but that's significant loss or hit to EBITDA at this point. I didn't really put on this slide, the volume variance, even in those other categories I showed you, because it would just make this slide look very lopsided, and I really wanted to kind of focus on those kind of operational initiatives that we're looking at every month and trying to control. So before I leave this, because I'm going to make a right turn into something else, let me stop and give you a chance to ask questions.
Radiology stuff. There's a facility fee, and there's some groups that are group billing for the and collecting their own reading fee, or are we doing both?
I don't know if I have all the details on that.
The pro fees, they're billing and collecting.
Yeah, they bill and collect their pro fees, but there's a certain reconciliation back of things back to us. Yeah, and so that's the lag that we have.
The other thing on the Santa Cruz County, I saw the notice that it's ending. Is there anything I should know about why it ended, or?
The contracted organization, clinics, that the county was contracted with here in our facility, the contract that they had with the county ended at the end of June, and the clinics didn't want to extend it for another 3 or 4 months. So it just ended, and so there was no more there, so we're kind of back to the old way of doing things until the counties should.
And then at that point, are we going to be doing anything? So that's all good.
So we'll just do what we've sort of always done. If they do end up here and they need medical clearance, we'll take care of them and then they'll go to that unit.
Nice. Come back to labor productivity. Okay, what was the premium pay?
That's like overtime, double time. It's a smaller portion of this. I just have it
Okay.
lumped, together, because this is really like a volume and rate type
Yeah.
calculation. It's like the rate side of the calculation. Spending so much per visit, but when you have less volume, unfortunately, we spend more.
You open with, the obvious, not negative, not framing that negative, it's a very clear statement that volumes remain down. July is probably slower, but our staffing costs are not able to adjust costs down to lower levels. I think a bigger question is if that continues to be our trend, our new reality, so we adjust to that and maybe it's setting the stage for, board retreat and get to have a conversation like this about what is coming next, because it's still, unfortunate timing with what I mentioned you'll be talking about, HR one.
Unfortunate timing.
The unfortunate timing of having 3 months of lower volume boxes, bigger than we expected. We're not hitting our volume targets. And now we have the president has signed July 3rd, HR one, that won't refer to as name. That, changing the landscape of everything, so these are both, approaching ahead that I think we'll have to dive deeper on next Monday. So I'm still absorbing from Friday, seeing the financials, and didn't expect it to be glorious.
We have a way, a sense of teaching that immigration backgrounds. Volunteers for the second harvest. She said there used to be blank around the corner. That's right. Yeah, nobody's coming.
Yeah, we hear that from them as well. I think probably our best proxy for that for the hospital is the apartment volume. And in the last month, weeks, it's down about 10 or 12%. There's probably something there. I'm surprised it wasn't really down the first 5.5 months or so, but I think a lot of that ICE looking activity has ramped up the last couple of months. We're trying to drill down into some of those data, emergency department, what that might look like. As you know, a lot of people use our emergency department as primary care.
Madam Estimator, early months of, people just stay at home and they're not sick enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
And before we leave this, we started, the blue side of the equation. Thanks for not using red, but, supply expenses, is that something that you think we'll continue to see better than expected results looking forward? Are we approaching kind of the feeling of what, or is he, are we able to just talk about, how, is there still more savings?
This is a very, volume and rate driven thing. So there's more savings to be had in terms of, getting better rates through contracting, getting to the right tiers. Definitely just in terms of not over purchasing or not expiring, wasted products that expire. There, you always have some of that in, kind of efficiency stuff. But then, we also have a, volume component. This is really kind of focused on the rate side of the variance. We're saving some of the money just, favorably because we're, not purchasing all the supplies that we would have for. It's, I can show you this, I just bring it because it's a little easier for me to read, but it was hard to put on a slide. But, you know, kind of try to track this every month, and so, you know, supplies is primarily favorable in the green. I only had 1 month where it looked, and like my spend was greater than
Yeah.
my volume.
Yeah. I guess I was leading into a place of the things staff may have identified with opportunities within our supply purchases. Are there still big things we might be tackling over yield $500,000 in savings, or are we kind of?
I think there's still, I think still more to tackle. Yeah, you know, we have a new, you know, we've had an interim supply chain director for about a month, maybe, not long. And now we did hire somebody who's gonna start near the end of August. And, so I think as you get that leadership solid and they do a handoff between what our interim guy has done, he's done some good investigation and made some good changes. I think we will identify more opportunities.
You've definitely identified opportunities. I don't know if he'll get them all implemented by the time he's gone, but
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll set up the next guy first.
Okay, next slide. So, I'm just gonna change direction for one slide to just talk about accounts payable aging. Cash has been very tight, and it's, you know, scary tight when you think about volumes down now, volumes down last month are translating into cash down this month. Volumes have been very low in July, so they are translating into cash down next month. So that is really weighing in on how much AP we can pay. So our aging, generally speaking, has not made much progress. And I'm sorry, here I did use the red bar, because green is kind of your current and up to 7 days old, yellow's 8 to 30 days, and red's everything over 30 days. And just to give you a sense of, you know, we got about $13.5 million worth of this. I just gave you second quarter, but I also have, you know, what as of last week looks like, and there's about, you know, $13.5 million worth of outstanding AP, of which about 1.8 of that is the current stuff, and over 9 million of it is, so 68% is the over 30 days old, and and about 5 million of it is over 90 days old. So we do a lot of painful work in the planning what we're going to pay each week. The AP team and Jessica, they have a lot of pain in working with vendors on payment arrangements. Phyllis has done it, Steve's done it, you know, trying to set payment arrangements, set expectations, kind of make follow-ups that said we weren't able to pay everything we wanted to. Our basic goal right now is to try to keep something going to people, not every week, but often enough that they don't feel forgotten about, you know. And that some vendors have been pretty willing to work with us, others are getting a little nervous and a little more anxious about getting payment. And, you know, unfortunately, I look ahead with my cash collection forecasting and tracking, and it's going to get worse before it gets better because of the low volumes. I mean, the next 3 weeks are at least probably 3 to 6 weeks are going to be very low AP weeks. So that's all I have to say on AP and cash right now. Switching gears to the next slide. We're doing budget a little bit differently this year, and I think the good news is I have a really solid team that's working on budget. I have a new senior financial analyst, Dina Enrico, who just joined us a month or a little more than a month ago. She comes to us from Sutter. She's very solid, very financially or technically solid in being able to manipulate data, so she's helping us. I have Vanessa, who has been with us, and I recently promoted her into a Director of Finance Planning and Analysis. One of the position consolidations we did is we eliminated the Finance Manager position. So Vanessa, besides all the other things that she was doing, did take over the budgeting process. And so we are focusing a lot of energy right now on trying to get volumes really solid, really well understood. Today I'm only going to talk to you a little bit about the kind of high-level stats, but we are also doing some pretty deep drill downs into the department-level stats and kind of gaining a better understanding sometimes of the relationships between, how many labs does a typical walk-in get done, or how many, radiology things happen, because it's not always a one-for-one. We don't have all the bells and whistle type of systems that work on relative value units and everything. We're sometimes counting procedures, whether they take 5 minutes or an hour. So there's a lot of really deep in detail. So we're spending more time up front on the volume work. It is, as we get this right, and we're building it as dynamically as we can, that if we have to change something, it'll make all the calculations thereafter flow through, because volumes really drive your revenue, and they really drive your salary expense and pretty much your supply expense. And then they have some relationship to the other, but the others are a bit more fixed. So this is a little bit hard to read. I probably should have maybe done this over 2 slides, but at the highest level, we put on here kind of what the rolling 12 months through May volume had been, and kind of where we're projecting 26. But we had also done a year-end projection for 25, and so I leave this in draft mode, because if anything's going to cause us to maybe rethink our 26 budget, it's going to be what's happened since May and what kind of continues to happen. As a good example, this says I'm expecting a 3% admission forecast change, from rolling 12 to 26. Well, when I had done this based on where I thought I was going to end 25, it was a 2%. We had all kind of sat down and said, we think we can do 2%. We've got some things coming. We're solidifying some position relationships. We think that potentially there's some more volume. But now we've had 2 more months pass, and especially with July's volumes being down, we may need to reassess those volumes. I kind of went back through all of this because I hadn't looked at it for a few weeks since we sat down to do it, and then I look at it again and I'm going, what was I thinking? 5.6% days. What was our original thoughts? And they were, much of this was more in the 2% range, or potentially, we think we're going to have a length of stay of about 3.6. Looking at what our historical year-over-year averages has been, where we're kind of sitting year-to-date, where we thought we would end the year. So these volumes are pretty fluid at this point, but they're our starting point. We're going to be spending, a few more weeks really getting into the volume, making sure that the lower-level detail stats roll up to these higher-level volume stats. This is kind of base budgeting, so at this point we are not yet factoring in initiatives, and some that come to mind is, since Cath Lab wasn't open yet, I'm going to treat Cath Lab as an initiative kind of over again, because I don't really have a good feel for what I'm going to get between now and December. So we're going to put our best efforts, with Jerry and Phyllis, Steve, about what kind of estimate we're going to put in for the Cath Lab. As we bring in a new MRI and a new CT, there's efficiencies. We'll have 2 CTs, so there's additional volume there. We haven't layered that on top of this type of volume. focused on the base. So after we get that volume really solidified, then we will, you know, kind of plug it in. We've done some high-level plugs in from a revenue side, but until we really do our CDM work, which we're kind of starting, and do a little bit more with labor standards, we don't have a true picture of some of the expenses. Starting to think about gathering some of the inflationary factors. So I'll probably have, you know, another update in the August meeting, and then, you know, the hope will be by the September meeting to really start to have that, kind of budget at a very high level, not ready to approve, but a very high level draft starting to come together, and somewhere between August and September really defining what's that EBITDA target that we're shooting for. The big unknown here is what I'm about to pass off the baton on, but it's like all of this is kind of status quo. It's not talking about what happens with the patient population. So I just, you know, mainly wanted to introduce to you right now that we're looking at it, we're trying to turn it on its side and look at it. We're thinking about a lot of things to make it more solid, and just taking a little bit different approach to the front end of this, to make it more dynamic as we need to be able to turn on a dime. So with that, I am actually going to turn the floor over to Steve.
Thanks. So what's on the screen first here is this is where, one of the places where we started our analysis. The summary of the analysis from the California Hospital Association. So they've done a full analysis for hospitals statewide. And so you can see two columns here. So the left column is their low estimate and the right column is their high estimate. The low estimate anticipates a $66 billion hit to all California hospitals over the next 10 years. The high estimate is $120 billion. I'll go down these columns just so that we sort of have a grounding and understanding of where their analysis starts, because that will, this then feeds into trying to sort of funnel this down into Watsonville Community Hospital. So on the left, you see in red, the first one is the hospital fee program. That's also known as WAF, that Julia is always talking about. And the bill refers to it as provider tax programs, but in California it's the hospital fee program or the quality assurance fee program. So the low estimate anticipates that WAF 9 is approved, so as it is approved. The managed care organization or MCO tax revenue, that's assumed to be lost in both of the CHA scenarios. It doesn't impact us very much, according to my conversations with the Alliance, because the Alliance already pays us at a higher rate than traditional Medi-Cal does. So the managed care organization tax is supposed to be a tax from the managed care organizations of the state up to the state, and then they redistribute it back to providers. What is happening in the state budget is the governor is saying, now I'm keeping it for my own general fund, and the fact that the budget state is has a deficit. So CHA is just sort of assuming in both of these scenarios that that doesn't come back to the providers. But it doesn't really impact Watsonville Hospital appreciably. Alliance is very paid. That's sort of what that gap is supposed to be made up for by the MCO tax to other parts of the state. We kind of move past that one. The next one is state-directed Medi-Cal payments are going to be capped. And so that's going to reduce the amount of money that the Alliance is getting from the state, and therefore that they're able to pay to providers. So that's going to be part of the That bottom line at the bottom is a 14% reduction in Medi-Cal revenue. That's a big piece of it, is that there's going to be caps put on the rates that the Medi-Cal program has, and that there will be more caps in 2020. The fee program, or the provider tax, or the QOF, gets phased down starting in 2028, all the way down until it gets to 2032. And we can talk about specifically how that applies to California, but that will, without a doubt, have an impact on our QOF revenues, at the very least starting in 2020. And then there will be Medicare cuts that are sort of required by federal law, because the bill, despite all of these cuts, the bill grows the federal deficit. So because of that, there will be DHA estimates cut to Medicare revenue. On the right side, the worst case scenario is that QOF 9 is denied. So CMS will be making that determination probably no sooner than December of this year, at which point we will know better what our QOF revenue starting in 2027 will be. QOF 8 rolls into 26, so 2027 is that the QOF 9 impact will be felt one way or the other. It'll be somewhere at or in between these two scenarios of the two red bullet points, right? It'll either be approved as it is, it will be denied entirely, or there may be some sort of cut or cap in between there. We just won't know until December or first quarter. Fee program revenue is eliminated entirely under this high estimate, so that's where the not just QOF 9, but any future QOF program as well. The MCO tax revenue is still lost, and Medicare cuts are still there due to inflation. So if you go to the next slide, I just kind of took away those middle bullet points and just pulled over the bottom line so that we can see those, and this is the basis for sort of the very high level first analysis. So Rosie, if you click one more time to bring up a couple bullet points. So in 2023, according to the OSHPA data, our hospital's Medi-Cal net revenue was 0.073% of all California hospital Medi-Cal net revenue. So if we take that percentage and layer it on top of CHA's $68 to $128 billion impact for the whole state, the $48 million to $93 million impact for us. So that's based on that 14% and 4%, or the 30% and 4%. So that's kind of the baseline, and I will argue over the next couple of slides that that's low, because we have a larger proportion of QOF benefit than the average California hospital. So as you go to the next slide, again, we pull out those QOF bullet points, the hospital fee program, or the hospital quality assurance fee, or QOF. Go to the next slide, Rosie. Our hospital in QOF 8 had 0.33% of the net benefits of California hospitals. So that's quite a bit higher than the 0.073 that we have of overall Medi-Cal benefits. So our QOF impact for the QOF 9 and beyond decision is going to be proportionately much higher for Watsonville than it will be for the state as a whole. So next slide, Rosie. So kind of taking all of that into account, Julie did a lot of work on our Medi-Cal net revenues year over year and Medicare revenues, as well as the fact that there will be, in the DHA memo outlines this too, is there will additionally be people who are just uninsured entirely. So it's not just people, it's not just that's getting paid less for Medi-Cal, but it's also people not having Medi-Cal anymore at all. You factor all that in, and this is kind of what we've come up with so far for our projected impacts. 2023 to 5.5 million next year, and it just goes up from there. And in 27 and beyond, it's really an unknown because we don't know what the cost decision is yet. But it's at least going to be those numbers in the parentheses. And then really just hard to put specific numbers down to specific years, 29 and beyond. But it does, I think with the hospital fee programs going down and getting capped through 2032, you know, these numbers will keep getting more negative, at least.
Again, in my hearing you correct, that this does not yet factor in a scenario of how many people might lose insurance and show up in our ER.
So it's attempting to do that. It's really hard to do. So we know that from the Alliance and the county, we've estimated that the county of Santa Cruz will lose 3,000 to 4,000 people off the Medi-Cal rolls in the next year. About half of the Medi-Cal enrollees in the county are in our district, but probably more than half of them are going to be disproportionately impacted here. And then those numbers just go up every year, right? I've seen some estimates as high as a third of people who are on Medi-Cal could eventually lose over the next 5 years.
That estimation, it's just going off of eligibility requirement changes, not factoring in the type of headwinds with eligibility requirements, frequency, and or ability to obtain appropriate information from our patients.
So it's the work requirements are going to pull some people off of the rolls. It's the having to re-enroll every 6 months.
Right.
People are gonna fall off. Just we have data on that from other states that have done that, right? It's the undocumented people who the state has covered and will now start to come off with significant restrictions. So it's all of those.
Does that factor into Alliance's projection?
Yeah.
I think you know, there had been a pause on the whole recertification during COVID, and when they went back to recertifying, almost 2 years ago now, at the time, the Alliance had estimated, just with that, losing like 18%, and I remember the last numbers I saw, it was they had lost at least 17%.
Yeah, it was like 17.5 or something.
Yeah,
they were pretty
their
close.
projections were pretty close on, and that was less restrictive, you know, less often, what this is.
Right.
Back to my earlier comments, start for, you know, creative, that our hands are tied. My career, I've been close to a lot of really bad moments, and I'm having a hard time finding pathways out of our current, you know, what we're doing now. We're not going to be able to market, you know, increase marketing and promotion. I mean, we're not going to grow our way out of here. We're not going to changes in our demographics instantly overnight of who lives in the community. We're not going to see changes in payer mix. I mean, the foundation of who we are can't change fast enough to fix these holes. And
Right.
I'm not sure we want it to change.
Particularly with no cash.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's my earlier comment about where we're at now. Puts us in a really horrible position. It'll be better. This is changing our whole structure of what we've been thinking.
And Julie and I had these conversations, even in my, our catching up phase, with the interview phase. Part of why I want to be, in a short amount of time, been able to see what we can squeeze a little bit more out, whether it's with better performance or rates, and, realization adjacent in opportunity. Demand for services that maybe aren't like super sexy in terms of providing a whole bunch of, big bolus of net revenue for the amount of volume that you're pushing, low reimbursing stuff.
Yeah.
But there's demand there for utilization. So how do we get it? I told Julie, it's like one of the things I don't want to have the can that kick down the road, or I want to kick that can down the road as long as I can. I don't want to go to a meeting. Just start making right to the board, folks like you, of what services can we no longer afford to deliver. I don't want to do that. So I think there is, it's a long way of saying, I think there is more that we can. We have big headwinds, but I don't think we're harmless, and it's not going to solution for this problem entirely, but we can make it less bad. I believe that. That's right. That's fine.
Yeah, and we haven't given up on the advocacy with the state, right? The state, Allison and I have conversations all the time with our state legislators. They know that they're gonna have to backfill some of this. But there's a lot of competing interests there, right? This bill cuts everybody, and so everybody, right? We've just had 5 Planned Parenthood clinics around us close. So the state has that on their radar. So we're on that, and we'll keep pushing for all of those. So one question I had for you all was, I have a plan to do this slide deck tomorrow night board, and I just wanted to get feedback on it. Is there any thoughts on that? Or changes you would recommend to the content or the messaging or anything like that? Otherwise, I'll give it pretty much the same way I gave it.
Let's stay here. Yeah.
All right, start.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine. I'm overthinking this in some ways, and I think it's my perspective. Starting here without any other context is the next slide, start adding more context about our situation. In these scenarios, so I think the directory is good. This is, I assume this is pasted right from HA's site.
That's off their memo.
Yeah.
That's just a screenshot of
Yeah.
their memo.
So,
I went to the 2 pages that that's sidetracked into figuring out how they were different.
Okay, yeah.
There could be some consolidation. I don't know if
And
I think that you're making different points in those,
right.
but all of this duplicated for a little bit.
I appreciate that feedback, and I tripped over it myself when I was just presenting it just now, so I'll do that.
go to the final page. Yeah.
And I'm gonna change that, I'm gonna make that header more clear too,
Yeah.
just in case anybody prints out the one slide, and then your projected impacts of HR 1 on WCH. Right?
Are there any assumptions in these projections, or any factors in these, build these assumptions that are not included? That you can, I'm not saying that, I'm just wondering if there's other things you would layer in.
You mean that would make them look even worse? So you see it goes from like 3 to 5 to 4 to 7 to 5 to 8. That ramp up is a guess, right? I don't have anybody who's come out and said, this year the Medi-Cal reductions are going to be this, and then next year 10,000 more people are going to lose their coverage, and the next year 20,000 more people are going to lose their coverage. I just have next year it's going to be 3 to 4, and then by some point in the future, it's gonna be like, tens of thousands.
I guess
So I just kind of interpolated that ourselves.
I was thinking like another factor, like on the other side of that coin, where you have like this is lost revenue.
Yeah.
The other factor that is patients are gonna come in delayed, more severe condition, uninsured. So the other half of that mathematical equation is revenue loss.
Yeah.
Because you're treating a population that you're not gonna have any revenue tied to.
Yeah, that's in the CHA
Okay.
analysis, so it is in that bigger part of that funnel. And so when Julie and I are then doing the, how does it impact Watsonville Hospital specifically, that's a part of that.
Yeah.
But those are guesses, right? Those are really hard to predict in actuality, and so, yeah, could they be slightly better or much worse?
Yeah, because that could get into a whole different service mix than we're used to. Besides,
So like, starting 2026 loss of 3.3 to 5.5, make sure who's ever reading this knows what that number means.
Sure, not just assume they know what the parentheses.
Yeah, and it feels important, kind of, it's, to me, like, the context of, we're effectively $8.5 million in the red already this year. If that continues, get all the losses. Like, how to, I think this is lost on here, how to make sure if somebody's reading this standalone, that we understand. They might think, $100 million, net operation, $3 million estimate towards that.
Right.
I was just like in context with what we're dealing with right now. I'm not convinced that's the best strategy, by the way. Because then now I'm thinking of other people who read it and they start losing a panic with us and how the press might.
Yeah, messaging around this is gonna be challenging.
Yeah. We'll have press tomorrow, they will be looking. Okay. This, I think, have to have press. Yeah. I'm not even sure that's the right word right now.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
so actually, to the point of having press tomorrow, just thinking of some of the other slides. I always fear putting out that I've got, AP issues of this magnitude that can get into the press.
Well, this can too.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering, do I keep that slide in to the board meeting?
I mean, like I said, it's here now, but it's also maybe more detailed for the full board, that it's more of a finance committee conversation.
Yeah, you're right, these are already out in the public, you're right there. Oh, just naively thinking they won't think to go to the finance committee
I mean, I would say,
website.
I'd say something else to know about it. This is really important. Maybe this deserves a comment. I think the slide itself is present well for like a public meeting. I think just the duration of it, it's not a year look, it's April through June. It's just, I think it could be, we got a lot of explaining that I don't know that there's value in explaining going through the meeting. Let's say the slide itself, I would comment on that. But let's leave that out. I think it could create other questions that we don't need to talk about.
Right.
But I think the KP aging issue is somewhere in the report that should just really be a reference to cash that we can make. We're managing cash right now with our AP. Any other